We're back to the Author's Corner on the Total Education Network. Again, TotalTutor.net for more information. Twitter, Total Tutor, Neil S. Haley. Facebook, LinkedIn, Neil Haley. And I'm always excited interviewing New York Times best-selling authors. And she has an interesting tie-in. I was researching some of her stuff. We look at the soap opera books she writes, to the mystery novels, to all the different things. And anytime you're a New York Times best-selling author, it's just you've reached the pinnacle of your profession. So I'm going to welcome to the program Alina Adams. Alina, how are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you.
So don't you agree that when you get that final validation that you're a New York Times best-selling author, the labor of love is so worth it because you finally have met some standard that, you know, a lot of people look at in the public, in my opinion, when you look at, hey, they really liked my book, and it's an honor to have that title.
It's true, because writing, as I'm sure everyone who writes knows, is a rather lonely and isolating profession. You sit for hours in front of your computer and you write words, and then you send the words to a person, and maybe the person likes their words, and maybe they print your words and they send them to other people. And sometimes so long has passed from when you first wrote the book to when it comes out that your mind isn't even there anymore. And periodically people will tell me, you know, I really love such and such part. And I'll go, oh, yeah, I did write that. Thank you for reminding me. That was good.
How many books have you written, by the way, Alina?
Oh, you know what? It's an interesting question. When you ask me like that off the top, I feel like I have to count. I wrote 3 soap opera tie-in books. I wrote 5 figure skating mysteries. I wrote 6 romance novels. I wrote a couple of nonfiction titles. So let's say baker's dozen. No one's ever asked me that before. I've never counted.
Well, if you listen to some of my authors' interviews, Alina, I really ask strange questions compared to other authors. I'm not author shows, because other author shows, they ask questions, the basic ones. So, what's the title of the book? Oh, can you tell me the characters? Not like deep questions. I love always to listen to these authors and hear what their passion is and why they've written the books, because everyone, it's a labor of love what you guys do. It's not
Absolutely.
you're not gonna become millionaires unless somehow you're Stephen King or some other person, or you end up getting a book that's sold into a movie and then everyone buys your book. It's a process that you have to constantly work, sometimes work as in another profession as well, but it's something that just fuels your passion. You love creating characters. You love living through the stories. And I think that's the thing I talk to so many authors about is they just are so passionate about how they create their characters and how they develop throughout the writing process, right?
Right. Well, let me tell you something about how the figure skating mysteries, how they came about, speaking of passion and speaking of life experience. I actually worked as what's called a figure skating researcher for ABC Sports and for TNT and for NBC.
Wow.
What that basically means, when you watch television, when you watch a figure skating broadcast, someone has done all the research on all the athletes, on their personal lives, on their music, on what their program is about. You've interviewed them. You've interviewed their families. You've interviewed their coaches. You've put together entire binders on these people, and then you hand them to the announcers who can sound off the cuff when they go, well, so-and-so started skating when she was 4 years old, and she took her puppy to the rink. And it's all these wonderful humanizing details. You know, how ABC Sports and Wide World of Sports sort of brought humanizing the athlete into television. Well, someone had to do all the research on that to produce all those up-close and personal pieces. And that's one of the things that I did. And for that, like I said, you don't just learn about the skaters. You meet them. You go to their homes. You get to know their families. You get to know their coaches. You get to know their life stories. And sometimes when you get to know their life stories, you get to know things that you can't put on the air. They won't like it if you put it on the air. The network won't like it if you put it on the air. So there's that. So actually, people always used to ask me, they say, when are you going to write your book where you're going to tell the truth about everyone? And my response was, when I never want to work again. So that moment hasn't come. But what I did instead was I wrote a series of figure skating murder mysteries. which are set in the world of figure skating at the World Championships, at National Championships. And although it says on the front of the book very clearly, these characters bear no relationship to anyone living or dead, that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. Let's just say that I have had fans write me over the years and say things like, is so-and-so really supposed to be so-and-so? I go, legal disclaimer, but So if you're a skating fan, they're really fun from that point. And talk about creating characters.
Right. Well, let me jump to something when we think about it. And it's funny. I was watching ESPN, and I don't know if you know this. The Tanya Harding stories coming on ESPN. 30-30.
I was actually in Detroit. I was in Detroit when that happened. The Nancy Kerrigan knock on the knee heard around the world.
Yeah.
I'm very familiar. I was there in '94 in Detroit.
They're going to put that on ESPN in January, 30-30. And I was going on the Facebook page trying to get Tanya to try to see if she comes on my show. Again, I connect with people on LinkedIn. I try any different way to get interviews with the most interesting people. It's just such an interesting thing. So I just bringing that up. So when I think about figure skating, you talk about murder. Thinking about that, you think about what happened with the whole Harding. That's a mystery in itself, for sure.
Well, I'll tell you something funny. As I said, I was in Detroit in 1994, and when Nancy was hit on the knee, all of us were saying, laugh, laugh, wink, wink, oh, I bet Tanya did it. Nobody meant it. People were just saying it. And so then when the story came out, talk about truth being stranger than fiction, we were all just kidding around, and it turned out, yeah, it really was Tanya. Or, for instance, my first book, Murder on Ice, actually came about because, I don't know if you remember the judging scandal of 2002, where the gold was awarded to the Russians, but then the Canadians complained, and there was a formal complaint. Well, what would have happened if the judge who supposedly voted the quote-unquote wrong way had been murdered? You have quite a few suspects there. You have the winners, you have the losers. And there's one thing that you learn in skating, one thing that Peggy Fleming always says about skating, is that no one can do it alone. No matter how talented you are or how committed you are, unless you have a group of people, usually parents and coaches, supporting you, you can't do it alone. But then when you lose, think about all the people around you who have also invested a huge part of their life and their emotions into you. You have some suspects whose motives are very deep and very passionate, and that's the best kind of thing for a murder, because I'm one of those people. I hate money as a motive for murder, because to me that's dry and boring. If I have a motive for murder, I want passion.
Absolutely, definitely, and it's something where you're like, yeah, we want something interesting. So going through that mystery of who done it in so many ways, and how many people in the figure skating world and the Olympic world like that you've wrote about these things, and especially with your background, and which I don't know if you bring up in your on the cover of the book or different things. How do they respond to this, especially when they know, do they get a kick out of it, saying this is so comedy, hilarious?
Let's put it this way: the people with good senses of humor, they enjoyed the portrayals of skating, because all of the skewering that I might do is done with love. The fact is, I love the sport. I love most of the people in it. I love how passionate they are. I love how dedicated they are. They're amazing people. They're amazing athletes. And most of them understand that when I sort of make fun, it's kind of like, when people make fun of your own family members. I can say that, but someone outside can't say it. I think they saw the love that was there. And in fact, one of the ways that I think that the skating community has really embraced the figure skating mystery series is that the books were initially published by Berkeley Prime Crime as paperback originals. But then last year, I was able to get the rights back to those books, and I turned them into ebooks, but not just ebooks. I turned them into enhanced ebooks, which means they had video in them.
Oh.
And I was able to make a deal with the Ice Skating Theater of New York, who are a professional ice dance company, to have access to their entire library. And so I was able to use video from their professional performances to, in a way, cast the characters in my books. So you'd be going along and reading the story, and the story is exactly the same as it was in the Berkeley Prime Crime paperback version. But then instead of just having a performance described to you, you can click a button and you can watch the characters skate. It's like a living illustration.
And that's a way to really bring that connection to people who love figure skating. If you're
Exactly. Because all the words in the world are not going to describe the grace and the speed and the artistry of these skaters.
And when we think about specific sports in the Olympics, figure skating in the Winter Olympics is top-notch. Probably the first people on the list of what to cover in an event next to hockey.
It's definitely the marquee sport, absolutely.
And that's the thing. If we're going to get the gold, and if you take the gold, you're taking a lot of sponsorship because of those blood, sweat, and tears that I went through, and now I'm not going to get compensated at the end of this. I think that's so.
Well, think about it. Think about it. People literally give up their entire lives to master this skill, and it all comes down to 5 minutes and a split second and the opinions. And in fact, one of the things that in 2002 so upset people about, the pairs verdict is that it's not as if it was unanimous. It literally came down to one judge. And one question that I always wanted to ask, well, if you assume that one judge, the judge that was accused of being bribed and trading deals, but what about the other judges? If you're saying that all of the judges were bribed, but if you're saying that only one judge were bribed, what about the other judges who also then, without being bribed, thought that the other team was better? How does that work? Nobody really addressed that.
No one did address it. It's so true. I'm like,
no, it's a very interesting question because if you look, it's very rare, since this is a subjective sport, that somebody wins all across the board. There's so much subjectivity, and subjectivity is not something that you can ever prove or disprove the person was biased or anything else. How do you judge that? How do you judge subjectivity?
So why did you want to relaunch them as ebooks? What was the motivation? You wrote the books a long time ago, and now you say, "Hey, let's go and relaunch him." Yeah.
Because the technology that exists now simply didn't exist when I wrote them. I wrote them between 2002 and 2006, actually between those Olympics, with the last one coming out in the subsequent Olympics. And that technology was not available. In 2006, we weren't thinking about ebooks. And even if we were thinking about ebooks, we certainly weren't thinking about enhanced ebooks, books in which you could put audio and you could put video and you could have people jump around in the story, tell the story their own way. You could change perspective. That's me. We talked about passion earlier. My current passion is very much not only taking my own previously published titles and turning them into enhanced ebooks, but working with other authors to see what they have, that could be turned into an enhanced ebook. I'll give you an example. There's an author, his name is Dan Ellish. He writes middle grade books, children's books, but he also had a show on Broadway called 13 last season, where he wrote an original musical score to go with one of his previously published books, The Worldwide Dessert Contest. And we were able to produce the book where you read the story and then you stop and you hit a button and you listen to a song, an originally written song by a Broadway veteran that you can then listen to as part of this experience. I like to say we've gone from reading books to experiencing books. It's bigger than that. And that just fascinates me because it's almost like when sound came to movies. It just opened up a whole other dimension to what you could do with an art form.
You see this again with the tablets and the smartphones and all these opportunities.
They can all do that. They can all do that. They're all set up. All you need is an internet connection. So I have actually, a lot of my friends are telling me they do all their reading on their phones now. And that way they can listen to the multimedia elements, they can watch videos, they can do audio. It's amazing. The medium is changing the message, not to get overly McLuhan.
No, that's fine, because I keep telling people, like, I do most of my Twitter, all my tweets on my phone. I don't do them on a computer. And whenever I have a chance to sit down at a computer, I'm editing radio or I'm sending I'm not even sending emails. I rather send them on my phone. There's only a few things I do on a computer. And whenever the phone is able to take and edit radio and stuff, I don't know if that'll ever happen, but you never know. With technology and how things develop, maybe it'll get as big as a computer and you're carrying around a phone that's as large as a computer. Technology, you never know what happens with technology.
Well, from what my husband is an engineer, and from what he tells me is you have more memory in your phone than the computers that sent a man to the moon.
Isn't that amazing? It's amazing where technology has gone. And now I also saw you were involved in a biography as well. You wrote for, was it Sarah Hughes? Am I correct?
Yes, actually, actually, that's sort of what got me started in the whole writing about skating world. I actually wrote a biography of Sarah Hughes 3 months before she won the Olympics. So she can thank me for that, as I'm her good luck charm. Basically, when I wrote it, at the time that the editor who suggested the idea, we were just hoping she'd make the Olympic team. For a while there at Nationals, it didn't look like she was even going to make the Olympic team. And then she came out of nowhere, and she won the Olympics. And at the time, I thought it was probably the luckiest publishing thing that would ever happen to me. But then a few years later, I was actually working for 2 soap operas, As the World Turns and Guiding Light, which were produced by Procter & Gamble Productions. And for the 50th anniversary of As the World Turns, I wrote a tie-in novel called Oakdale Confidentials, which was an original adventure for the characters on the show. And that book became a New York Times bestseller. So then I thought that was possibly the luckiest thing that ever happened to me.
And Alina, that's what we're going to talk about next month, is Oakdale Confidentials. Now I'm learning more about who you are as an interview, because like I said, I interview so many authors, but you're so easy to talk to, and I guess an entrepreneur as well with the whole ebook thing. So where can we find information on you, purchase your books? And especially there's authors out there that say, you know what, I want to change my book to an ebook so I can, that's more interactive, which I think is so key, especially if we're talking about children's books or you're talking about anything.
Absolutely.
So where can
I did a cookbook with another author where we made the cookbook. It's called Skinny Spices, and it's about how you can use spices to liven up your food. And we made it searchable so that you can just go with whatever ingredient you have. You can enter it and get recipes that have that ingredient. That was another enhancement that we developed. And I do that through Alina Adams Media, and you can find me online at alinaadamsmedia.com, where you can get information both about the books that I've produced and the authors that I worked with. You can also buy all of my books, including the Figure Skating Mystery Series, the enhanced ebooks. They're on Amazon, they're on Barnes & Noble, and you can get information on that on my website, alinaadamsmedia.com as well.
Well, fantastic. Enjoyed the conversation. Next month, we'll have you back on to talk about Oakdale Confidentials, which will be very interesting, because I think that going into the whole soap opera genre, another interesting thing, it looks like your passions have led to some really good opportunities for you in writing and now with the business. And I think that it's something we really have to think about. How can we make our books differentiate them for our competition, and also provide one of the newest mediums out there where people read using a tablet or a phone? And
that's my passion.
All right. Well, good talking to you, Alina, and we'll talk next month, okay?
Okay, terrific. Nice talking to you.
All right, bye-bye. All right, you're listening to Author's Corner, and we'll be back in just a moment.